It is. It's just I. My favorite thing to do now is walk my dog in the Garden District.
Oh, my
And,
God.
For decades, John Goodman was the man America trusted. The big laugh, the steady presence, the guy who felt familiar the moment he stepped on screen. Whether he was the loving husband on Roseanne or the unpredictable Walter in The Big Lebowski, audiences believed they knew him. But behind that comforting image was a fear he carried quietly for years. The fear that everything he built could disappear overnight. Even at the height of his success, Goodman felt like he was standing on unstable ground, waiting for it to give way. At 71, he finally admitted something that stunned longtime fans. The hardest battles of his life didn't happen on camera. They happened alone, in silence, long after the applause faded. And that truth reshaped how people saw him forever. But that public image was carefully protecting a much deeper pain. John Goodman's story begins with loss. When he was just a young boy growing up in Missouri, his father died suddenly, leaving a hole that never fully closed. The house grew quieter, heavier. His mother did her best to hold everything together, but something essential was gone. When his older brother left for college soon after, John felt abandoned in ways he didn't yet have words for. He became withdrawn, unsure where he fit, carrying a sadness that followed him into adolescence. While other kids seemed confident and carefree, John learned early what it felt like to be alone in a crowded room. That sense of isolation would stay with him far longer than anyone realized. And school only made those feelings sharper. School was not a refuge for John Goodman. It was a daily test. His size made him an easy target, and the teasing never seemed to stop. Classmates mocked him, stared at him, made him feel like he didn't belong. Instead of fighting back, John learned to disappear emotionally. Humor became his shield, a way to deflect attention before it turned cruel. He laughed first, so others wouldn't laugh at him. But inside, those moments piled up, shaping a quiet insecurity that followed him into adulthood. Even as he grew older, even as success came later, that voice never fully went away. The one that questioned whether he was ever enough. Still, something unexpected was waiting just ahead. For a while, football looked like John Goodman's escape. Earning a scholarship felt like proof that he mattered, that his future had direction. His identity became tied to the field. Strength, discipline, belonging. But before he ever played a single college game, an injury ended it all. Just like that, the plan vanished. No spotlight, no clear future. The loss hit harder than he admitted, because football wasn't just a sport to him. It was purpose. Without it, he was forced to confront the same question he'd been running from since childhood. Who was he, without the role he thought would define him? That question led him somewhere he never expected. Acting wasn't a childhood dream for John Goodman. It was a detour, one he took after everything else fell apart. Wandering into the university's drama program, he discovered something unexpected. On stage, he controlled the narrative. His size wasn't a weakness. His voice wasn't something to hide. People listened. They watched. For the first time, he felt seen on his own terms. Acting gave him confidence, but it also gave him permission to become someone else. And that feeling was powerful. He immersed himself completely, unaware that this new passion would one day place him under a spotlight far brighter than he ever imagined. And stepping into the real world would test that confidence fast. New York City was supposed to be the proving ground, but for John Goodman, it nearly became the breaking point. He arrived with ambition and almost no money, crashing in a tiny apartment near Hell's Kitchen with help from his brother. Days were spent auditioning. Nights were spent bartending and waiting tables just to survive. Rejection came fast and often. Roles slipped through his fingers, bills stacked up, and doubt crept in quietly. He began to wonder if he had misread his own potential. Still, he kept going. Voiceovers, commercials, off-Broadway shows, anything that kept him close to acting. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the real stories behind Hollywood legends, take a second to like the video and subscribe. And here's a question to think about. How long could you chase a dream before self-doubt convinces you to quit? Because just when he felt invisible, opportunity finally knocked. That opportunity came in the early 1980s when John landed his first film role in Eddie Macon's Run. Filming in Texas alongside established names felt surreal. For the first time, he was on a real movie set, surrounded by cameras, trailers, and people who seemed completely at ease in a world he was still trying to understand. His role was small, but the moment was huge. It confirmed that he belonged, at least a little. At the same time, it exposed how intimidating the industry could be. There were no guarantees, no safety nets. One job didn't mean another would follow. Still, he absorbed everything, learning how film worked and how fragile momentum could be. And then, a very different kind of project changed everything. When John Goodman auditioned for Raising Arizona, he had no idea it would reshape his career. He met two filmmakers he'd never worked with before, Joel and Ethan Coen. And instead of a stiff audition, the room filled with laughter. The script was strange, fast, and fearless, and Goodman instantly connected with it. Even before he knew if he had the role, he sensed something special was happening. Playing the unhinged Gale Snotes allowed him to lean fully into his comedic instincts without restraint. The film's success didn't just open doors, it labeled him as a force. Suddenly, casting directors saw range, timing, and fearlessness. That reputation followed him straight into America's living rooms. In 1988, Roseanne transformed John Goodman's life almost overnight. Playing Dan Connor gave him stability he'd never known. One set, one city, one steady paycheck. The working-class humor felt familiar, almost personal. The cast bonded quickly, feeding off each other's energy and laughter. But with that comfort came sudden visibility. People recognized him everywhere. Expectations grew. For the first time, success wasn't something he chased. It surrounded him. And yet, beneath the laughter and applause, he felt unprepared for the pressure that came with being so visible, so consistently depended on. Because fame doesn't pause when the cameras stop. As Roseanne soared, John Goodman quietly struggled. Sitcom rhythm felt rigid, repetitive, the very thing he feared becoming. He worried about being boxed in, about losing creative freedom, about being replaced the moment he slipped. While audiences saw a confident, lovable father figure, he felt tension tightening behind the scenes. Fame amplified his insecurities instead of silencing them. The more successful he became, the more he questioned whether it could all vanish just as fast. And without realizing it, he began leaning on something that promised relief, but would eventually demand a heavy price. And off-camera, that coping mechanism was already taking control. What began as a way to unwind slowly became something else entirely. For John Goodman, alcohol didn't arrive as chaos. It crept in quietly. A drink after work turned into drinking before work. He convinced himself he was managing it, that no one could tell. But the pressure of fame, the fear of becoming irrelevant, and the constant demand to perform made alcohol feel like relief. It softened anxiety. It blurred doubt. Soon, it became routine. John started showing up on set thinking he was hiding it, believing professionalism could cover everything. But the truth was, people noticed. The slurred words, the distracted focus, the version of himself he didn't recognize. Deep down, he knew he was losing control, but admitting it felt more terrifying than continuing. And the moment that exposed everything arrived without warning. The breaking point didn't happen in front of cameras. It happened quietly, when John missed an important rehearsal because he was too far gone to function. There were no excuses left to make. That's when he called his wife, Anna Beth, and admitted what he had been denying for years. He needed help. Not later. Not someday. Now. It wasn't dramatic or glamorous. It was humiliating, raw, and honest. Anna didn't judge him. She acted. She found a treatment center and stood by him while he stepped away from everything. For the first time, John stopped running. He chose survival over pride. And that decision didn't just save his career, it saved his family. But sobriety revealed another battle he could no longer ignore. Even after getting sober, John Goodman was still carrying years of damage. His weight had climbed dangerously high, nearing 400 pounds. Simple movements were exhausting. Pain followed him everywhere. He feared his body would give out before his mind ever found peace. Doctors warned him. Friends worried. And John finally listened. He realized alcohol wasn't the only thing he had been using to cope. Food had become comfort, escape, and punishment all at once. Fame didn't protect him from that reality. Money didn't erase it. If anything, it made the consequences harder to ignore. And what he did next shocked everyone around him. John Goodman committed to change with the same intensity he once brought to acting. He hired a trainer, restructured his life, and rebuilt discipline from the ground up. The weight didn't fall off overnight. It came off through consistency, discomfort, and honesty. Slowly, more than 200 pounds disappeared. But the bigger transformation wasn't physical. Sobriety gave him clarity. Weight loss gave him control. For the first time, he wasn't reacting to fear, he was choosing health. Friends barely recognized him. Hollywood noticed. But more importantly, John felt present in his own life again. And with that clarity came a powerful career rebirth. With his life stabilizing, John Goodman's work took on new depth. Films like Barton Fink proved he could be unsettling, complex, even terrifying. He wasn't just the lovable dad anymore. He was unpredictable, intense, unforgettable. Critics took notice. Directors trusted him. Each role felt earned, not accidental. For John, this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about truth, about showing every side of himself he once tried to hide. And just when it seemed like he had reached his creative peak, one unforgettable character would turn him into a cultural icon, because what came next would define his legacy forever. When John Goodman first stepped into the role of Walter Sobchak in The Big Lebowski, he didn't see it as a legacy role. At the time, it was just another collaboration with the Coen brothers. Strange, sharply written, and unlike anything else being made. Walter was loud, volatile, obsessive, and deeply emotional beneath the surface. Goodman leaned into those contradictions without restraint. He didn't soften the edges or chase likability. He trusted that honesty would carry the character. During filming, the dialogue felt so precise it almost sounded improvised, which only added to the chaos Walter brought into every scene. When the film was released, it didn't explode at the box office. Instead, it simmered. Over time, audiences discovered it, then rediscovered it. Lines were quoted. Scenes became rituals. Walter transformed from a supporting character into a cultural force. For Goodman, it was a powerful lesson. True impact isn't always immediate. Some performances don't shout, they echo for decades. And while Walter made him unforgettable, his next role showed a very different side. After years of intense live-action roles, voice acting offered John Goodman something he hadn't felt in a long time: balance. When he took on the role of Sully in Monsters, Inc., he wasn't thinking about animation history or box office numbers. He was thinking about staying close to home and choosing work that didn't consume him. Sully was physically imposing but emotionally vulnerable, a character driven by responsibility and fear of failure. Those qualities resonated deeply. Recording alongside Billy Crystal brought an unexpected energy, and the chemistry between their voices gave the characters warmth audiences immediately felt. When the film became a worldwide success, Goodman realized he had connected with an entirely new generation. Children didn't know his past struggles or career arcs. They heard safety, kindness, and strength. In a strange way, Sully reflected the man Goodman was becoming: calmer, present, and no longer running from himself. But serious roles were still calling him back. By the time John Goodman joined Argo, he had nothing left to prove. And that was exactly why the role worked. Playing Hollywood makeup artist John Chambers required restraint, confidence, and quiet authority. There were no explosive scenes or comedic outbursts. Instead, Goodman relied on subtlety, grounding the story with calm realism. Working alongside Ben Affleck and Alan Arkin reminded him how far he'd come. He wasn't scrambling for approval anymore. He was trusted. The performance didn't dominate the screen, but it anchored it. Audiences and critics noticed how comfortable he looked. Not flashy, not desperate, just fully present. For Goodman, Argo represented something deeper than success. It was proof that growth doesn't always mean doing more. Sometimes it means knowing when to do less. Yet television would soon test that emotional control. Eli Gemstone was unlike anything John Goodman had played before. A powerful televangelist surrounded by chaos, ego, and absurdity, yet weighed down by grief. The role demanded emotional honesty beneath outrageous comedy. Goodman couldn't hide behind volume or humor. He had to sit in stillness, letting pain breathe. Some scenes required him to simply listen, react, and exist. That restraint came from lived experience. Addiction, recovery, loss. All of it informed Eli's quiet authority. Working with Danny McBride pushed Goodman constantly, forcing him to stay grounded while everything around him spiraled. The result was a performance that felt surprisingly human. Viewers didn't just laugh at Eli Gemstone. They understood him, and behind that understanding was one unwavering presence. Throughout every rise and collapse, one constant shaped John Goodman's survival: his wife, Anna Beth. She knew him before fame hardened him and before addiction pulled him apart. When he finally admitted he needed help, she didn't hesitate. She acted. Her steadiness became his foundation. Recovery, weight loss, and clarity didn't happen in isolation. They happened inside a partnership built on patience and truth. Goodman has never pretended otherwise. As his career stabilized and his health improved, he began to see success differently. Awards faded in importance. Longevity mattered. Presence mattered. Love mattered. And as he entered his 70s, those realizations would force him to confront the most terrifying truth of all. Because age brings honesty, you can no longer outrun. Turning 71 didn't feel like a celebration for John Goodman. It felt like a reckoning. For the first time in his life, he couldn't outrun time with work, humor, or distraction. His body had already warned him once, And now age made those warnings impossible to ignore. Roles were still coming, but the question underneath them had changed. It wasn't, "What's next?" anymore. It was, "How much time is left?" Goodman began reflecting on the years he nearly lost, to addiction, to exhaustion, to a body that once carried too much weight to keep going. He thought about the moments he almost didn't survive, and the people who would have been left behind. Fame no longer felt protective. Success no longer felt permanent. What mattered now was staying present long enough to enjoy the life he'd fought so hard to rebuild. Aging stripped away illusion and left only truth. And that truth was unsettling. Surviving wasn't the same as living. At 71, John Goodman realized that fear hadn't disappeared. It had simply changed shape. And what he finally admitted next stunned even those closest to him. At 71, John Goodman said something that caught many people off guard. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was painfully honest. He admitted that his greatest fear wasn't failure, or even fading relevance. It was relapse. After everything he had survived, the idea of slipping backward haunted him more than any bad review ever could. Goodman revealed that recovery didn't end when he got sober or when the weight came off. It stayed with him every day, quietly demanding attention. He spoke about how easy it is to believe you're past it, only to realize temptation doesn't vanish with age. That awareness forced him to live differently. He stopped pretending strength meant control. Strength meant vigilance. Strength meant asking for help before the fall. The truth was unsettling. Discipline, not talent, had kept him alive. Fame didn't save him. Applause didn't fix him. Structure did. Support did. Love did. Saying that out loud at this stage of his life felt terrifying, but also freeing. Because once he named the fear, it stopped owning him. And that admission changed how he measured everything that followed. After admitting the fear that had followed him for years, John Goodman began to look at success through an entirely different lens. The milestones that once defined him, ratings, box office numbers, applause, no longer held the same weight. What mattered now was consistency. Waking up clear-headed, keeping promises, showing up fully for the people who had stood beside him when his career and health were hanging by a thread. Goodman realized that survival alone wasn't an achievement if it came without purpose. Peace had to be chosen daily, just like sobriety. He learned to say no to roles that drained him, and yes, to projects that respected his boundaries. That selectiveness wasn't fear, it was wisdom earned the hard way. For the first time, he felt in control of his time rather than consumed by it. Aging didn't scare him the way it once did, because he wasn't measuring his worth against youth or momentum anymore. He was measuring it against honesty. And in that quiet recalibration, John Goodman discovered something rare in Hollywood: contentment without craving more. But the way the world remembered him was still evolving. As John Goodman moved deeper into his 70s, the idea of legacy stopped being theoretical and became deeply personal. It was no longer about how many iconic lines people quoted or which roles were ranked as his best. What mattered was something quieter and harder to earn: endurance. In an industry known for chewing people up and moving on, Goodman had remained, not untouched, not unscarred, but standing. Colleagues began to describe him not just as talented, but dependable, a presence that steadied a set, someone who showed up prepared, focused, and generous, even when the spotlight wasn't on him. Younger actors paid attention to that. They watched how he listened more than he spoke, how he carried authority without ego, how he treated every role as work worth respecting. Goodman understood that influence isn't about domination or volume. It's about consistency over time. The same applied to his personal life. Being present for his family, protecting his health, and honoring the support that saved him became non-negotiable. Looking back, he no longer saw his struggles as shameful detours. He saw them as proof that survival itself can carry meaning. Hollywood is full of brilliant talent that burned too fast or disappeared quietly. John Goodman didn't vanish. He adapted. He stayed. And in doing so, he redefined what success looks like when fame is no longer the goal, but life itself is. And that understanding set the stage for his final truth. John Goodman's story doesn't end with applause, headlines, or a final curtain call. It ends with a decision, the same one he's made quietly, over and over, for years, to stay, to remain present in a life he nearly lost. After surviving addiction, extreme weight, and the pressure that comes with decades in the spotlight, Goodman reached a place where honesty mattered more than image. He stopped pretending fear had vanished. Instead, he learned how to live alongside it without letting it steer him. That shift changed everything. He no longer chased validation or worried about how he'd be remembered. What mattered was waking up clear-headed, honoring the people who stood by him, and protecting the stability he fought so hard to build. The boy who once felt unwanted, the man who hid pain behind laughter, and the actor who nearly burned out all merged into someone steadier, quieter, and stronger. Hollywood may celebrate his unforgettable characters, but the truth behind the scenes is more meaningful. John Goodman didn't reinvent himself for relevance. He rebuilt himself for survival. And in an industry where disappearing is easy and endurance is rare, his greatest achievement wasn't fame. It was choosing life, again and again, when walking away would have been easier.